Okay. Can you see my presentation and the slide that says what is ethology?
Yes.
Yes, we can
Yes.
see another
Yes.
slide.
Okay. Pardon me? And yeah, I should put it in the slideshow, right? Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to take off my glasses so that you don't see the reflexes. Thank you very much for this opportunity. This is actually a great challenge. It's perhaps the most difficult situation, the most challenging context to talk about one's science is in the context of children and in the context of people who come from a completely different background. That is what really puts you to the test of knowing if you really know what you're doing and if you know what you know how to explain this. I'm going to give it a go, and you will tell me later on if I've managed. But I should first say something about who this ethologist is who is delivering this talk to you. So I have a background professionally in farm animals. I did a degree in animal science, that is how to care for, how to feed, how to breed in terms of selective breeding for the kinds of animals that produce the meat, the egg, the milk that some of us eat, the wool that some of us use to keep ourselves warm in the winter, and also to some extent the leather, the skin, etc., that is used for products. I did my degree in animal science. I got very fascinated by the topic of ethology. It was, I remember very clearly, this was the first discipline, the first topic in my course that really made me thrilled. And it was, in the end of the day, what I came back to work with after finishing my course. So I did a PhD in applied ethology. Applied ethology is the study of animals in captivity, animals, domestic animals, animals that are somehow in human society. And I worked with laying hens for my PhD. And after completing my PhD, this is now it's nearly 20 years ago. I moved to work with laboratory animals. So I have worked with laboratory rodents, mice especially, for 20 years, although not exclusively doing ethology. I also do a lot of ethics. And very much more recently, I have started to work also with companion animals, and specifically with companion dogs, through the work of a person in my research group. I'm the coordinator of a research group at the Institute for Research and Innovation in Health at the University of Portugal. That's the I3S, which you see at the symbol here. And that means that I do a lot less hands-on research, and I have done a lot less hands-on research for the last 10, 12 years, because my work is much more about managing people and their research than actually my own hands-on research. That's enough about me. I want to talk about animals and animal behavior. And I want to start by reflecting on how we, even though we may not even think about this, we intuitively use behavior to make inferences about animals. This is the cat who shares the house with me and my husband, and this picture is taken an early morning, in the summer, a couple of years ago. I came downstairs to the kitchen and I found the cat like this, lying down right inside the cat flap, and I thought that was a strange behavior, and I had not seen this before. It was unusual, and I got a little concerned. But after I had made some noise in the kitchen, I came back, turned around, and I found the cat like this. And I immediately stopped worrying, because this is the usual behavior of the cat. When she sees me and she thinks that perhaps there should be something more interesting in, or at least that's my interpretation, she expects there something interesting to happen in that empty bowl instead of the dry feed that she's got in the other bowl. And really, if we have companion animals who do not speak to us, I guess in the same way as if you have if you're responsible for pre-verbal children, it's really on basis of their behavior that you know if they are doing well, or if there is a problem. We as a species have a long history of using animal behavior, and actually needing to use animal behavior for our survival. To the left here you see a photo of rock carvings. These are among the very few open-air Paleolithic rock carvings that exist in the world. If you ever come to Portugal, make sure you have a couple of extra days so that you can travel up the Douro River to Foz Coa, where you can, or Vale de Coa. It's a valley where you can find these carvings, because they are fantastic. And they are basically all, or the vast majority of them, are about animals. And on a lot of them you can also see, or at least if your eye gets the help of the museologists that illustrate this, you can see how they also illustrate the movements of behavior. So clearly this was important for people at that time, and it's not difficult to imagine how it was, because hunting was one of the activities to get food. That was knowing how animals move, and be able to read their movements and learn from this is obviously crucial if you're a hunter. The two photos to the right are from a region in the north of Portugal, a little closer to the coast than Vale de Coa, and they are contemporary. These are, I think, about 5 years old, and this is a shepherd that is herding his big group of sheep, I think, sorry, of goats. A goat herd, did I say goat herd? I should say goat herd. Herding his big herd of goats, there are about 100 of them, together with this team of dogs, through an area that is vast, that is mountainous, and where there are wolves. So for this goat herd to know how to read, and also to some extent steer the behavior of these goats, as well as working with the dogs in doing this, is again obviously crucial to make sure that he gets the same, let's say 112 goats back in the evening that he brought out in the morning, and is not losing any of them in this vast terrain in the meantime. That is human relations to animal behavior, specifically about ethology. Ethology is one way of handling animal behavior, and it's a study of animal behavior. If you go and look ethology up on Wikipedia, you will see something like the first point here, that it's a study of animal behavior using objective methods, or based on observations. Of course, speaking about objective methods in science is a huge provocation, especially I think to the philosophers in the room, perhaps also to the artists. But what is meant here with objective methods is more about the fact that it's behavior as it is seen from the outside. And this comes, at least I think, partly from a period further back in the 20th century, when ethology was defining itself versus the other endeavor of studying behavior, which is psychology, which relies a lot more on introspection. Obviously, you cannot have an animal telling you in words what it experiences, and that is why observation is the crucial thing. If you ask me about ethology, I would talk a lot about how ethology is a discipline of biology, and that means that it looks at behavior within the framework of biology, which is a lot about how, which is a lot about evolution. It looks at ethology looks at behavior as an evolutionary adaptive trait. And another point that I already made, but I want to make it again here because it's important also for this course. I'm going to talk exclusively about applied ethology because that is what I work with. I've never worked with wild animals. Wild animals is completely out of my, not only my comfort zone, but it's completely out of what I am, have any claim to expertise on. So applied ethology is ethology applied to domestic animals, or animals kept in captivity, or animals that are otherwise under human influence. And I also want to stress this is different in different languages. When you talk about domestic animals, in Portuguese, people will think about animals that live in the household. They will think about dogs and cats. I think domestic animals are in fact animals that live in the household, but with a wider understanding of the household, and going back in time a little to when our household contain more animals than cats and dogs. So domestic animals are also the farm animals, or all animals that have been domesticated, which is a whole different story, and you'll get into that a little through the reading. I will not talk about that more here. If you've had time, which I hope, to look at the case studies, you've seen the video Rat Life, and you've already made yourself a little more familiar with the concept of behavior as a natural a natural history trait, as a trait influenced by evolution. But I want to spend a couple more words on that just to make sure that we all have the same understanding of what I refer to when I talk about evolution and natural selection. So natural selection is one of the key aspects of evolution, Darwinian evolution. Natural selection operates on populations of individuals. Those individuals whose traits are most adapted to the environment are the individuals which we say have the greatest fitness. That is what, if you've heard the expression survival of the fittest, that is what that refers to. Fitness as the capacity of being successful in that environment. A biological definition, slightly simplified, of fitness is the more offspring you have surviving until reproductive age, the greater your fitness as an individual are. Selection, there is selection for the genes that underlie those adaptive traits. And because more offspring with those traits survive, there will be more of these genes. These genes will increase in frequency in later generations. So that is how natural selection over generation change populations through genetics, through favoring the genes that make for the best adaptation to the environment. Behavior is a trait in this sense, just as physical traits are. And I'll explain what the picture to the left is. This is from a study in Sweden in the 1980s by Professor Per Jensen, who released production pigs in a semi-natural enclosure and observed their behaviors, and could demonstrate or could observe that despite the fact that these pigs have been selected for many years in a completely different environment, they still retain their ancestral behavior of nest building before they give birth. and a lot of other ancestral behaviors, but the one we see here is the sow collecting vegetable material to build a nest. Again, these are things, these are concepts that are referred to in the laboratory rat video. If you haven't watched it, please do so between today and the next time we meet. Now, differently from physical characteristics, behavior is not a constant. It's not continually expressed in the individual. It happens and stops happening, so to say. The animal is always behaving, but it's behaving in different ways. We use the term motivation to describe the complex interacting factors within an animal which makes it behave in a particular way in a given situation. Why do I illustrate this with two pictures of hens? Because the picture to the left shows perching behavior, which is how hens, both domestic hens and their ancestors, the wild jungle fowl, rest at night, because that is what protects them from predators. The hen to the right is a hen in a behavior study from my own PhD, who is opening a door which is made heavy, and the weight can be regulated in order for us to measure how much effort is this hen willing to make in order to get access to a perch to sleep on at night. We did this because we were inspired by Marian Stamp Dawkins, who introduced the idea of motivation in the concept of animal welfare and made a huge contribution to applied ethology in the 1990s by introducing this idea. She says in a very influential paper from 1990, subjective feelings can be assumed to have evolved because they help animals, or are inseparably linked to something that helps animals to avoid death or failure to reproduce. So if we go back, we see being able to build a nest that protects your valuable offspring, or being able to rest at night in a location which would protect you from predators, are behaviors that we can reasonably assume would help the animals to avoid death or failure to reproduce. So we would assume that subjective feelings would make the animals motivated to perform these behaviors. And in fact, that is what science is telling us. So based on this idea, animal welfare scientists assume that an animal experiences negative subjective feelings if motivated behavior cannot be performed, and vice versa. And you see that takes us back to the reflection earlier on about subjective versus objective. This is really about what we want to get at here are the subjective feelings of the animals, but the only mechanisms that we have access to, the only tools we have access to as ethologists is what we see. So we try to create situations where we think that the behavior we can observe give us some information about the subjective feelings. And I think I am quite short of time, so I'm not going to go into detail about this, but I want to just talk about, I want to mention Nico Tinbergen, who is one of the 3 Nobel Prize winners of ethologies and the one that really made the greatest impact on ethology, both by his 4 questions, which are still as relevant today as they were in the 1950s when Tinbergen introduced them, and by his influence by supervising students like Marian Dawkins and also Richard Dawkins and Desmond Morris, who some of you may be familiar with from science communication about animal behavior. So Tinbergen was really an influential person, and we can come back to discuss this perhaps at some other point during the week. That's enough of theory, I think. I want us to have a brief look at methods, and I was inspired by how Louise did this, so I'm also going to give you a couple of examples from work of ethologists to talk about methods. I'm going to give you this is really just a snapshot of a couple of different studies. They are all examples of methods, and well, we just jump into this. Sometimes we ask very complex questions, and I just refer to that, some other ways of measuring motivation. Sometimes, as ethologists, we are actually only, quote unquote, interested in observing the behavior. This is the case in work that I am doing together with Sophie, who is Sophie Brajon, who is one of the participants in this event, and together with other researchers, we are interested in why lab mouse pups often die at a very early point after birth. And there is a belief among people who breed lab animals that the females are killing their pups. We don't think that is what's happening, but obviously what we think and what people who breed mice think is not as important as what we can actually observe. So we needed to think out a way of working out how can we figure out if the mouse female actually kills her pups. What did we work out, or this is more precisely Elin Weber, who was a PhD student. She came up with this decision scheme where basically we are narrowing down on the last time a pup is seen moving and the first time it's seen still and not moving again, so when we assume it's dead, and is the female manipulating the pup in this time window in between those two movements. If she is not, we know that she is not killing the pups. That's our assumption. Sometimes the focus is on the pattern of the behavior, and I think some of the artists are probably familiar with this work of Muybridge from the second half of the 19th century. This is really one of the many examples where interest in animal behavior from science and art may meet. This capacity to make photos is very important to find the motion pattern. The motion patterns of animals is still very important today. The blue here shows the different sequences of how a cow moves when she's getting up and when she's lying down. This is important because if we want to design housing system that works for for dairy cows, we need to take into account their movements. Crucial point here is the cow, when she's lying down, she's moving forward at a point which you can see roughly corresponds to points 3 and 4 in the schematic. If the housing system does not allow her to do that, she is not going to be able to lie down in a comfortable way. She may be throwing herself down on her knees. She will be uncomfortable. She will eventually injure herself. And that's basically, you see a problem here with the left photo. You see there is a bar in front of the cow which will hinder her movement. To the right, you see there is no such bar, and it's easier for the cows to move. Louise, do I have more time?
Yes, please continue for me.
Okay.
Louise, we can't hear you. You have a mic off.
I was just saying, why don't you carry on briefly, Anna, because we can maybe just extend lunch a little. I hope that's
okay. I think I'm going to take about 5 more minutes. So these were examples of simply observing the behavior and what it looks like. But very often, as a scientist and a ethologist, you need to measure behavior, you need to quantify behavior. A key instrument here for you that you will elaborate yourself as an ethologist is sometimes you may rely on what others have done, sometimes you need to work that out for yourself, is the ethogram. The ethogram is a detailed catalog of the behaviors that you expect to observe or that you're interested in observing, in which you describe each behavior in detail so that you know that you are systematically measuring them correctly and that your definition of behavior is not sliding over time as you work. Another key aspect is your observation and recording methods. And if you're getting into doing this, you really need to buy this book. This is mandatory reading for anyone that comes into my group. It's a nice small book, quite accessible, and in fact, if we ever get to do a full-scale version of this course, which is 12 weeks rather than 1 week, this will be one of the readings for the course. And this is one of the decisions that you're confronted with if you want to quantify behavior. This is how do you sample and how do you record? And do you watch all animals? Do you watch a single animal? Do you circulate between animals? Do you watch the animals continuously, or do you watch them during predefined intervals of time? For how long do you watch the animals? What exactly is it that you watch, etc., etc.? Do you go there and are you present there yourself, making the observations? Do you write on a piece of paper? Do you score on a tablet or some kind of other device? Or do you film your animals and record from the video recordings? Lots of decisions about method. And I'm going to give you just 2 more contemporary examples, and I've just chosen this because they are from the last issue of Applied Animal Behavior Science, which is the main journal, the main scientific journal for applied ethologists. And I just picked 2 because I thought they were interesting and illustrative. Behavioral responses of 2 breeds of domestic chicks to feed an alarm called playback. I don't have a behavior illustration to show to you here, but I'll share that with you later. Oluwaseun, who is the first author, has promised to share videos with me later today, so I hope that later this week I can share this to you. She was interested in finding out if commercial broiler chicks and Nigerian indigenous chicks reacted similarly to alarm calls when they could hear them. How did they react? They reacted by running, by freezing, and by clustering. These are probably all 3 adaptive behaviors. If you're a small, very vulnerable animals, these are chicks between 1 and 6 days old. Running because you run away from what may be threatening. Freezing because if you stay still, then the predator won't see you. And clustering because if you huddle together with the other chicks in the brood, it's less likely that a predator will find exactly you, because he may be finding one of your brothers, or he may be attacking one of your brothers and sisters. And what they found was that in fact both types of chicks perform this behavior. There are some differences here. I think the only one that is really visible and that is significant here is clustering. So the indigenous chicks, for some reason, did not cluster for as long as the commercial broiler chicks, but all of them perform this behavior. The other paper is about suckling, nursing behavior in piglets and in sows. And this is a fantastic behavior to observe, and I'm going to share a video with you on Slack for this, because pigs have such a fascinating interaction around nursing. A sow gives birth to a large litter of piglets. They can be between 15 and 20 in the more prolific breeds. And we breed sows to have more piglets because farmers want more piglets. They want pigs to be more productive. What happens is at some point there started to be a mismatch between the number of teats that a sow has and the number of piglets that she gives birth to, and that's the reason why there is an interest in fostering piglets. And sorry, if people mute their microphones, it will be helpful. Sorry, I'm easily distracted. And so this is what this group of researchers wanted to look at. But if you look at what they actually measured, which you can see at the right side of the screen, it's not a lot of behavior. They looked at milk letdown, which they define as more than 50% of piglets suckling at the same time and persistently at a teat for approximately 15 seconds. Because sows have this fascinating way of nursing where they only let down milk for a very brief period of time, and there is a complex interaction before that to make sure that all the piglets are at the udder and have a teat before the milk starts flowing. So that's a really important behavior to look at. And then they also looked at teat fighting, and they looked at missing milk letdown. But if you go further down, you see they also looked at knee abrasion, snout abrasion, and udder abrasion. So they actually looked at if there were wounds, because by measuring wounds on the animals, you have a sort of a history of what happened before in terms of behavior. And the last example that I give you here is taking that a step further. This was a very important finding about large carnivores in captivity. You know, perhaps you're familiar with the kind of abnormal behavior you can see in zoos where animals pace back and forth. We call that stereotypic behavior. This work by Rose Clubb and Georgia Mason, they were interested in finding out what could possibly be the reason why animals develop this. So they looked at an enormous amount of data, studies that other people had done of captive carnivores, and looked at different factors. And they, as you can see on the graph on the top, on the bottom graph here, you see the relationship between the size of the home range and the amount of stereotypies in captivity. And they found that the bigger the home range of the animal is, the greater the percentage of animals that develop stereotypy in captivity. And the animal that struggles the most here is the polar bear, because polar bears have home territories of several square kilometers. They take them several days to go around their home territory. So the mismatch between their home environment and the zoo environment is huge, and that is reflected in their behavior in the zoos. So that is a great example of how you can study behavior without studying behavior. And I'm going to skip this because we don't have time for that. And I just want to reflect also on the challenges that ethologists experience and that you will experience in the next exercise, or in the exercise we'll do later this week. Sometimes you can't see the animal. Often your presence will affect what the animals do, and that is what Christian Navroth, a German ethologist, is actually exploring in this GIF of his own research with goats. And sometimes observing with our eyes is perhaps not the best, or it's not the only way that we can access behavior. Listening may also be important. Thank you very much. This was also a very quick tour around lots of different issues, and I'm sure that you have thoughts and reflections, and there is the Slack channel for that.